Hello everyone, I'm Riddhi Meghani and we are discussing the Economic Survey 2021. So in the last video we were talking about the chapter fiscal development and we'll continue. Reforms in tax administration. The government has consistently adopted reform measures aimed at the long-term benefits of a more transparent, efficient and taxpayer-friendly tax administration. So in fact, India is actually not known to be taxpayer-friendly tax administration, and this is evident from the recent case of Vodafone and Kane, and this is what the government realizes now, and this is where they are working, and it's actually good that they must work. Once you realize where you have to work and you start to work, it's good. The platform is designed to ensure fairness by adopting measures like random selection through system using data analytics and artificial intelligence, dynamic jurisdiction, and so on and so forth. So they're taking some steps which through which they want to ensure that they're being fair and they're being transparent. And most importantly, they don't want any physical interface between taxpayers and the income tax department. And this is what it says here: Faceless Assessment Scheme 2020, to eliminate face to face contact between the income tax authorities and the taxpayer that can lead to an efficient, non discretionary, and by a single window system of assessment. So I think in times to come, we can see more reforms in case of tax. Now, trends in government finances, center, state, and general government. Now, prior to the COVID pandemic, government wanted to achieve a fiscal deficit target of 3.5%, but of course, this is not happening anytime soon. And talking about trends in receipts, central government receipts can broadly be divided into non-debt and debt. When we talk about non-debt, we have a tax and non-tax revenue. Then we have a non-debt capital receipts, which is nothing but recovery of loans and disinvestment receipts. Debt comprises mostly of market borrowings and other liabilities which the government is obliged to repay in future, of course. If you are taking कर्जा तो आपको चुकाना तो पड़ेगा ही. Then we talk about tax revenue. So here we have a beautiful pie graph. So GTR stands for gross tax revenues, and 55% is our direct taxes. So and out of that 55%, 26 is paid by you and me, and the corporates paid 28%. Then we have indirect taxes. GST takes 29% of it. Then we have our excise duties and then customs. Then trends in non-tax revenue of central government. So we see here that interest receipts are more or less the same. Dividends have gone down, and we have already discussed it in the last video that since we see that there will be a likely blow to the top line of the companies, so uh, they may declare small amounts of dividend in the current financial year. External grants are more or less the same. Others have increased. So on the whole, our non-tax revenue is likely to increase from 3.26 to 3.85 lakh crores. And non-debt capital receipts, we know that this is mostly the disinvestment targets or the proceeds of the government. And now we talk about trends and components of total expenditure with a low tax to GDP ratio, because you will have a less low tax this time. Central government faces the challenge of providing sufficient funds for investment and infrastructure expansion while staying within the bounds of fiscal prudence. So they actually are focusing on everything. So we don't want to go so over the board that our fiscal deficit goes too high, and yet we want that the government wants to maintain the momentum of the economy by focusing on investment and infrastructure expansion. Therefore, improving the composition and quality of expenditure assumes significance. And over here, we see that the capex is rising and the revenue expenditure is going down. This is about, yes, this is as a percentage of total expenditure. Apart from budgetary spending, extra budgetary resources have also been mobilized to finance infrastructure investments since 2016-17. Now let's see what extra budgetary resources are. Now, one of the leading and interesting trends about the government budget is that the borrowings made by government entities to run various government schemes are not shown in the budget. These borrowings may be done to finance some of the budgeted schemes like food subsidy, and maybe by government owned entities like the Food Corporation of India. If these items are also included, the fiscal deficit of the government may shoot up. And this is what, in fact, so of course, this means that this is not being that transparent. And this is mentioned by the 15th Finance Commission on extra budgetary resources. They have said it that they want that this is in the interest of transparency. Both the union and state governments, they have to make full disclosure of extra budgetary borrowings. And I'll give you an example of what extra budgetary borrowings are. So main entities that have borrowed are FCI, Food Corporation of India, NHAI, National Highway Authority of India, NABARD, and then we have HUDCO and Rural Electrification Corporation for electrification projects have also added to the extra budget borrowing. So these are the examples of EBRs. And we see that transfers to state this year is expected to go up. This is obviously because it's not just the central government that has budget constraints, it's the state governments too. Oops. And we talk about central government debt, it is actually at 97 lakh crore rupees. And trend in centers debt to GDP ratio. So this graphical representation clearly tells us that since 2004 and 5 we've been trying to decrease it, and we see a sudden spike here because of the COVID pandemic. The maturity profile of outstanding dated central government securities. So we are making a comparison between 2012-13 and the FY20, and we see that more or less the picture remains the same. So in the first 5 years we have to pay close to 30%, and it was the same in case of 12-13. In the next 5 to 10 years we have to pay 30%. Back then it was 35, and then in 10 to 20 years we have to pay 24%, and it was 22 close to 23% at that point of time. Now we talk about the state finances. We see that the debt to GDP ratio in case of this line has been on an increasing path in case of states as well. And RBI study tells us that the states should actually focus on their higher fiscal multipliers effect of capex, and they should focus on capex actually, which the central government is also trying to do. Now we talk about a very important data point here: trends in interest rate growth differential and general government debt to GDP. So IRGD, we have spoken about it in volume 1, and here we see some data points related to it. So this is since 2011-12, FY12 to FY20. We see that as long as our growth rates are higher than our interest rates, we can sustain debt, and our debt to GDP ratio has been increasing, and we see that our IRGD component has been decreasing, which should not be the case. In fact, in FY20 we were actually standing at 0. So this is a point of concern, because in FY20 we did not have any COVID problem. So this needs to be taken care of. And now we talk about the final topic, outlook. So we see that based on the trends available for April to November 2020, there is likely to be a fiscal slippage during the year, which we have already seen. And the fiscal response of the government has been a combination of demand and supply side policies under the ambit of Atmanirbhar Bharat to cushion against the pandemic shock. In order to sustain the recovery in aggregate demand, it is expected that the government may have to continue with an expansionary fiscal stance. Of course, because the private sector is not doing much, so the government has to keep the momentum. And then we see that the calibrated approach adopted by the government, adopted by India, allows space for maintaining a fiscal impulse. So we have to. This clearly tries to say that there will be a higher fiscal deficit for the budget. So this is it about this video. Thank you so much.